past few weeks, millions of people across the world, and including here in our own communities, have taken to the streets in an effort to bring attention to the issues of systemic racism and equality for all people. Joining us today is Ardre Orie. She's a social activist, publisher, philanthropist, and author on a mission to give marginalized voices a platform to speak. We're glad to have her join us to share her thoughts on some of these pressing issues affecting us. She also wants to share her thoughts on internal bias and racism and what's being done in our communities. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's start with this. You've created a platform for Black voices, specifically Black men. Tell me about it.
Yes, that platform is called 100 Seeds of Promise, and it was a response after I watched the unfortunate video of Philando Castile. At that time, I was just really feeling helpless and trying to figure out how I could be of support to my community and what difference could be made. And so I searched and I kind of came up empty, and then I determined, well, I'm here with the publishing house. I'm recognizing that many stories of Black men are not told. And then more importantly, we're seeing so many instances of Black men with targets on their backs. So I decided to launch this initiative to make sure that the stories of Black men were told and that they were provided with access to publishing and mass production, so that this is at least one avenue that we can find success and make sure that our voices are always told and not marginalized.
Well, that's awesome, because you've been able to gather these 100 Black men from all different industries, from all different walks of life. Why do you feel it's crucial for people of color specifically to document their own narratives and be able to share these personal stories?
Absolutely. I think that no one can tell your story better than you. And that goes for every person, who walks the face of this earth. So much of what we know about our history, was given to us. It was not necessarily the way that we chronicled it. And so I'm really on a mission to make sure that that is not the case. I believe that you experience life as an individual, as a person of a specific race, in a way that no one can say for you or speak that for you. So for us, it's very important that we share our stories our way, so that we leave blueprints behind for the next generations, so that we definitely document our excellence, and no one can do that except for us.
I think that's a really great point that you make up. Everybody has their own point of view and perspective. And I think the other thing that's great is when we hear these stories, you may find something that you relate to in that story or with that person that you wouldn't have known if they didn't share their story. Now, more than ever right now, we're seeing people, they're taking the initiative, they're having open conversations about things like racism. How can we also frame the issues of discrimination and police brutality within that dialogue?
Absolutely. What many of the stories that we're documenting do speak to that end. I think in some instances, there are many people who didn't believe that this was a thing. They believed that, Black people were continuing to create a narrative that was not present. And so as we document these stories, we're able to open discussions. We're able to have like an event that we just hosted, which was a virtual town hall meeting. And we had attendees of all races who wanted to just hear and listen to the viewpoints. So it's imperative that we, put this information in print so that we can recognize it as real. These are our true experiences, and then open the floor for dialogue, and then take measures to create true change. It's just a starting point with documenting information, but we have to go farther than that. This has to be something that is implemented through law, through legislature, all of the things that are happening that we're seeing with defunding different police efforts that are not in place of benefiting marginalized groups. And so this is a starting point with documenting and chronicling these stories.
Yeah, indeed, a starting point. It's not something that's going to magically change overnight. It's something that's been happening for years, hundreds of years. Do you believe we can successfully reduce some of this internal bias and adequately address systemic racism that's happening in our society?
I am one of the people who still has hope. I do know that we internally, we are a world that is filled with people who are drawn to helping one another. I don't think that we can change this if we continue to ignore the issues. I don't think that we can change this if we continue to pretend that these things are not happening. And we have to address it from all fronts. This is happening, in education. This is happening in corporate America. This is happening in media. This is happening in entertainment. There is not a space where this is not the case. And so we have to address it from all fronts. Every industry has to take a look at what it is that they're doing, look at their practices, look at the long-standing history of, oppression that has been going on, and to address it from there. But I am hopeful that things can change, and I do believe that we continue to do the work, we can have large-scale impact.
And I love that positivity. We look out at some of the imagery, at some of the protests and some of the things being said. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of anger that's probably, really deep-seated sadness, frustration.
Yes.
And that's trauma right there, right?
Yes,
So how do we
absolutely.
deal with that trauma, especially as it results from these folks who are, feeling like they're marginalized?
Sure. That is actually one of the other reasons that I started this initiative, 100 Seeds of Promise, is because I do recognize that as Black people, we are traumatized. We deal with this on a daily basis. We internalize much of this to try to just keep going. And so for me, my sadness has manifested in rolling up my sleeves and getting to work. My frustration, my trauma has manifested in seeing hope through, initiatives like this. And so I think that writing is important. Number one, that is a way. The paper always listens and the ink never lies. I think that it's important for us to document our thoughts. I do think that therapy is important. We need to talk about these issues in safe spaces, and we need to, for certain, address the mental health components that are a part of this, because this is something that is longstanding, and it has certainly affected our psyche over time. So we have to address it, but we are needing, in need of more safe spaces. Those are spaces that we have to create for one another, and that we also, need for other communities to create.
Ardre, I certainly see you out there putting in the work, trying to be the difference. You have an event coming up. Can you tell us about it?
Absolutely. So the 100 Seeds of Promise initiative, we are having a series of virtual town hall meetings. Those town hall meetings are the safe spaces that I speak of. And this is an opportunity for Black men to simply share their thoughts. They represent a myriad of different genres and professions. And so they speak candidly. They're able to share their anger. They're able to share their triumphs. They're able to share their joys. And so we find happiness in knowing that we are a group of people who are resilient. We are a group of people who are creative. We're innovators. And so when we come together, in spirit and truth, that affords us an opportunity to recognize our worth and our value, and to not be told anything different by society.
Amazing. Ardre, thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing some of that insight.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share this story.
Yes, and for more information, people can visit 100seedsofpromise.com.